think we have a very good attendance. We have more than 85 participants that logged in. So good morning, everyone, and welcome. It is a pleasure to have you all here in the first General Managers and Side Lead Forums for this very important session, where we will bring you expert insights on critical global developments that could impact your business here in Costa Rica and abroad. Today, we are honored to welcome a distinguished panel of experts from Dentons who will help us navigate the potential implications of Trump 2.0, and we're calling it what you need to know now. As we all know, global shifts can have ripple effects across industry, and staying ahead of these changes is key to strategic decision making. So this session again will be the beginning of this year's General Manager and Site Leaders Forum, and CINDE is committed to continue bringing you high-level discussion and drive expert topics on matters that matter for your operation and investment in Costa Rica. We really look forward to having and fostering a dialogue, providing value and supporting you in navigating this evolving business landscape. And with that, let's dive into today's discussion, and I hand it over to Pedro Muñoz so that he can introduce our very important speakers. Thank you.
Good morning, buenos dias, welcome. For Dentons, it is a pleasure to join this webinar organized by CINDE. We have a very distinguished panel today. We will get started by introducing former Congressman Jeff Dunham. Jeff is a very unique individual. He is a retired member of the military. He served in the Air Force, in the US Air Force in Iraq. He's also a farmer, a businessman, and a Californian Republican, a very rare breed. He served both in the Senate of the state of California, and he also served in the US House of Representatives. So he is as rounded as it gets. He has a very strategic mind, and we are very, very, very honored that he is here today to share his knowledge and his wisdom. Congressman, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Pedro. It's an honor to join you here this morning. Great introduction, and not a whole lot more to say other than I had the distinct opportunity to not only work with President Obama, but working very closely with President Trump when he came in. Since President Trump came in the second time, I've had the opportunity to work with the transition team, all of the secretarial appointments. So I've been very engaged with the entire administration as it's been put together very, very quickly. And now helping some that are still going through the confirmation process. So happy to answer any questions you have for me this morning dealing with the Trump administration. But let me just start by saying this 100 days, starting off, he's just showing very, very quickly he's not going to wait for Congress. He is going to be passing a number of executive orders. The press cannot keep up with him, not only from the various press conferences that he does every single day, but the executive orders change the dialogue every, hourly in the U.S. media. So it's a very interesting first 100 days, but he is really setting the pace with collaboration with other countries, but also tariffs, which is something I know we're going to get into more in this discussion. But the tariffs are real. He's using it as a very big negotiating tool. He said that during his campaign. He did it in his first term, but this term, he is going to use tariffs in a very, very tough way to make sure that America's interests are represented.
Congressman, we titled this webinar Trump 2.0. What would be the difference between Trump 1.0 and Trump 2.0?
I would say, first of all, the administration itself. He looks at the appointments completely different than he did the last time. I would say Trump 1.0 brought a number of different appointees that were more focused inside the government. where I would say now Trump 2.0, it is a lot of allies. He knows who he can trust. He's given each different secretary a specific mission, and all of them are aligned on government efficiency and making these first initial cuts in government to get government right-sized in the United States. So the administration itself is very, very different. Those early days in the first administration with four different generals that were all appointees had a very different aspect than Marco Rubio or Elise Stefanik or even Kristi Noem and Lee Zeldin. So I would say the administration this time around is completely different, but very focused on not only the mission that was set forth during the campaign, but specifically the framework that President Trump is laying out very, very early.
Thank you. One more question before we turn it to Anne. It seems like he's running the State Department. Is he running the USTR as well?
I would say yes. It is amazing how active he is. He doesn't sleep a whole lot, but he is very, very engaged in each of the different agencies. But especially USTR, he's going to be very, very focused on trade. He thinks that there's way too many imbalances with other countries, and he's looking to bring that balance back. He's also looking to reward our allies, and Costa Rica is one of those allies that we really, really need, especially with the semiconductors that he's laid out. It's really a balance between the U.S. and China, and he's looking to leverage as many allies as possible and bring them much, much closer. And semiconductors is one of those areas of business that we've been very successful on early on, but also have a really big need.
Thank you, Congressman. That's a perfect segue to introducing Anne McDonald. Hello, Anne. How are you?
Hey, good morning, all.
Anne McDonald is a media personality, a force to reckon with. She is served in the White House, the Pentagon, the State Department. She served also in the post-presidency office of President George W. Bush. And she is an expert on political risk. In fact, she is the head of our political risk department at Dentons Worldwide. So she is great at all things political risk. And she, as I said, she is a force to reckon with. You will see that. So, Anne, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you, Pedro. And greetings from Dallas today, our closest state to Costa Rica. So I'm happy to get to talk about some of our trade relationships, some of our opportunities we're seeing for the business sector, as well as some of the political risks that we know are coming from the first Trump administration. We know that the style of President Trump is very sporadic, is sometimes out of left field. And as companies and a lot of our clients are trying to prepare for what those risks could look like, what a Trump tweet lobbed in their direction could mean, I'm happy to also kind of share what I think the opportunities are and where we're seeing some early hints of what the formation of the new Trump administration is as well, and building on what Congressman Denham had said. So I think, first off, I like to tell a lot of my friends who are more hesitant and I have a lot of friends who are straight fearful on what this administration could look like. And I tell most of them that while I think a lot of times there are more hardcore MAGA people at the very top of the administration, of the secretary level and the where Trump has made senior appointments for his cabinet, I do think that a strong pattern that we're seeing across the rest of government in deputy secretary level jobs, in administrator jobs over some really key parts of our government, like Medicare and Medicaid, the largest part of our government spending. And then at some deeper levels of like our defense departments, acquisitions and sustainment activity. There are a lot of really old hats that people who have worked with government for a long time will know, and know that they're very expert. So, for instance, the head of our Medicare and Medicaid is a Dallas friend who was the head of McKinsey Global's worldwide healthcare policy center. So there's some people who have been studying government for a very long time, and they see this as a once in a lifetime opportunity to work with President Trump to significantly innovate and significantly reform the way that our government works. And in some of those ways, it's going to be really painful. And I think especially President Trump has signaled with his appointment of Elon Musk that he's fine with going hard and fast and in some really dramatic ways to reshape government and to act quickly, as Congressman Denham said, without Congress and without some of and definitely outside of the bounds of how our government has typically operated. But as someone who's worked in our government, I also will say that I don't know if there's another way that we could get to this kind of reform without this kind of fast acting work. But in some ways that I think that this administration wants to reform things in a way that could benefit Costa Rica. One example that I talked about with our CINDE colleagues as we prepared for this is the CHIPS Act money for Costa Rica. So while of course it's been passed, it's something that's appropriated, but with that examination of money, one piece of it that's interesting on a front that President Trump has already worked hard on is the indirect cost piece. And so currently, the way that most U.S. research grants to our universities work is that the indirect cost is usually in the ballpark of 40 or 50% of a grant, which I think as someone who really wants our aid to be representative of in what we purport it to be as true partnership money, the fact that this CHIPS Act money is going through Arizona and through a university in Arizona before it gets to Costa Rica, with that whole almost 40% plus of indirect costs being taken off of it. That kind of reform that President Trump is talking about is, I think, something that could be beneficial for Costa Rica on the global development side, with the $80+ million a year of development partnership funding that Costa Rica receives. And we also, I think, are seeing opportunities for businesses to really connect and as this administration still is very much in a building phase. There are not a ton of people at Department of Commerce yet. There aren't a full suite of USTR offices filled out. But I think the opportunity now for businesses to start to strategize on, as I said, where the risk could be in this administration that they possibly were exposed to last administration as well, but then and where they could be and where they could have a target on their back. But then also, I think there are great opportunities for, as Congressman Denham said, for strong allies of the U.S. and for partners that want to help the United States diversify its manufacturing back to this hemisphere to really grow and surge.
Wow. So what you're saying is that not only there is the CHIPS Act 1.0, but there might be a CHIPS Act 2.0, better and improved, and that will mean even more opportunities for companies in the region.
I think first, President Trump's first real emphasis is going to be the U.S. reform of government. It's going to be an emphasis on tax policy in the U.S., and that's going to take up most of the political oxygen in Washington for now. But as you're seeing, like the $500 million announcement Apple made of innovation that it's going to do in Houston next week, I think you are going to see some significant investment and significant desire for partnership that might not be a congressional action, and would defer to the congressman on congressional actions, but it might not be on the front burner this year or even possibly in the later part of this year. But I do think that partnership opportunities will be significant. And while there will be less on sustainable development work, and there will be some hard looks at areas of where some of President Biden's spending is seen by the Trump administration as wasteful and not inclusive of other forms of energy outside of renewables that we need to continue to invest into power. Of course, here in Texas, we like that reassertion of other parts of energy, but and in new energy technologies and nuclear and other forms. But so I do think that there are opportunities, and again, not confident where chips is on the priority list, but definitely in new innovation and opportunities to build partnerships in the Western Hemisphere, as we saw with Secretary Rubio's first visit to as Secretary of State being deployed to the region, I think is a really positive sign.
Well, thank you very much for your upbeat and optimistic presentation. That gives us courage, and I think that and hope, and I think we all need some of that.
We'll go into the risk more too, Pedro. I know you've got you've got us going in that direction as well, but starting positive.
Exactly. Okay. Last but not least, let me introduce Todd Dobert. Number one, I consider Todd my friend. Number two, Todd is the gringo Latino, the Latino gringo in the crowd. He is married to a Panamanian citizen, has a wonderful bicultural Latino American family. So in addition to all of his expertise in cybersecurity, communications, what else, privacy, et cetera, technology, we do have a Latino expert in Washington, D.C. And of course, understanding both cultures is fundamental. So Todd, please tell us what you're seeing in Washington, D.C., but also tell us from the Latino perspective what you see in the future for 4 countries: Costa Rica, Panama, your second country, Panama, the Dominican Republic, and also Puerto Rico. I know that you've been very, very busy in the last years working in Puerto Rico. So your understanding of Latin America is fundamental to what we're doing here. Thank you, Todd.
Thank you so much, Pedro, for your kind words. And you know that I feel the same way. Not only is my wife Panamanian, she's Chiricana, so she's practically on the border with Costa Rica. So very, very good understanding. Yes, these are very different times in Washington right now, to say the least. As you mentioned, in addition to being an attorney, I'm an engineer. So I tend to focus on things from a technology standpoint. I work with incredible colleagues like Pedro, Jeff, and Anne. They focus more on the political angle of it. I focus more on the technology side and how to get things done by working with professionals like this. And it strikes me that, not only has the emphasis changed on the focus of what this administration cares about, but the manner in which you'll need to engage with this administration, I think, is radically different. And I think that starting to frame what you're trying to achieve in the interest of the US and in the Trump administration in particular, so that you get taken along with the objectives that the administration has, is probably the means for success. And one way that I think is particularly successful, and really for, Costa Rica, Panama, Dominican Republic, and Puerto Rico, is to work closely together so that you can start having conversations with the administration in a way that doesn't cause any single company to have to stick their neck out too far on anything and get in front of everything else, and start working out frameworks and things like CHIPS 2.0, as Anne was talking about, different ideas that can improve the position of companies who are active in Central America in ways that can be touted as achieving the administration's goals, being not only consistent with America First, but actually furthering the goals of America First. And I don't think that those positions are necessarily obvious. So I think it requires some thought, and I think it requires some teamwork. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Pedro.
No. You're not off the hook just yet. Would you kindly share some words in Spanish for the crowd?
Bueno, Pedro, yo no quiero decir nada mal y nada de esta administración, pero está haciendo problema para mí en Panamá porque el canal es un tema sensitivo, por supuesto, en Panamá. Y por eso yo creo que, por ejemplo, el presidente de Panamá está haciendo buen trabajo que encontrar esta posición con gracia y a buscar una manera que resolver los intereses del Trump y Rubio en una manera que no tiene problema para Panamá.
Excelente, muchas gracias. So you, the crowd can see, the audience can see that we are truly a multicultural team here. So
Pedro, I'll make my joke in the infamous words of Bad Bunny. Todo el mundo quiere ser latino.
todo el mundo quiere ser latino. Thank you very much, Todd. So then I'm going to take the floor, and then we'll circle back to our experts. Vanessa, could you please put on my slides? Thank you. So there is a famous phrase in politics. It's the economy is stupid. James Carville, back in the 1990s, 1992, I think it was, said, it is the economy is stupid. Let's focus on the economy. As we say in basketball, keep the eye on the ball. So let's keep the eye on the ball. It's trade stupid. It's trade what matters to us. Yes, Secretary of State Rubio came to Central America, and the element that was absent, especially in Costa Rica, was trade. That does not mean that trade is not important. On the contrary, as soon as Secretary of State Rubio left, President Trump announced the ambassador of the United States to Costa Rica and what her priorities will be. And he was unequivocal. Trade and immigration. And he wrote a message on his social media account, and he capitalized both the words trade and immigration. So make no mistake, trade it is. Next. So the question that, or the issue that has been tossing around is Costa Rica a friend, an ally, a foe? And is the fact that we've been traditionally an ally of the United States sufficient? In my opinion, it doesn't matter. Henry Kissinger, former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, coined this phrase and borrowed it from European diplomacy. America has no permanent friends or enemies. America has permanent interests. So I totally agree with what Todd said. I think we should work in a team, and that small acts of appeasement are not the solution. We've seen the government of Costa Rica providing acts of appeasement lately. The Costa Rican government received 200 immigrants, and they are here in Costa Rica. They came from the United States, but they had come from Asia and other parts of the world. And Costa Rica abstained from voting a very recent UN resolution condemning the Russian invasion. I think those things carry some weight, but they are insufficient to create a state policy in connection with trade and the United States. Next. And it is my opinion that Panama and the Dominican Republic are natural allies. I agree with what Todd said, and I also agree with Todd's perspective on Puerto Rico. By the way, Todd, you were too shy. You did not speak about your experience in Puerto Rico. Maybe in the next round, it would be good if you also tell us what you know about Puerto Rico, in addition to Bad Bunny. But basically, we should position ourselves as the new Taiwan. And I want to leave my Dentons colleagues with that phrase. This region, including Costa Rica, Panama, the Dominican Republic, and Puerto Rico, now that Todd has included it, should be presented as a package in Washington as the new Taiwan. And this region is so important that President Trump, very early in the game, nominated his ambassadors. I'm not going to even say the U.S. ambassadors, his ambassadors to the Dominican Republic, Panama, and Costa Rica, respectively. Leah Campos, a former CIA agent, not agent, but officer, a member of the CIA. Kevin Marino Cabrera, a member of the Cuban community, of course, very close to Secretary of State Rubio, and Melinda Hildebrand. I'm going to leave it here, and I'm going to go back to Congressman Denham. Congressman, what do you think about the idea of a new Taiwan and presenting Todd's idea, working as a team, the Dominican Republic, Panama, Puerto Rico, and Costa Rica, and presenting itself in Washington, D.C. as a joint front?
I think it's a great idea. Pulling a number of countries together with like-minded interests and really showing not only the teamwork of the countries themselves, but also the partnership with the U.S. over China. I mean, we are trying to strengthen our trade partnerships, and I think working in conjunction is a good way to show that unity, that teamwork, that importance of trade, and also addressing immigration at the same time. Immigration is going to be one of those continued partnership issues, and I think that goes right along with being good economic trade partners as well.
Thank you.
If I can build on what Congressman Denham was just saying, I think in that orientation of presenting yourselves in Washington as the united front, I think one area that we haven't talked much about yet, a little bit on chips, but is the technological cooperation that the United States wants, and the importance of the tech leaders of the United States in this administration, as we saw with the inauguration and how prominent they were, as we've seen with Elon Musk's role in the government. Tech rules right now, and tech is incredibly important. So to the extent that we can look at where security partnerships and where the Trump administration's strong focus on and desire for greater security partnerships. And I would even, depending on where the election goes in Ecuador, look at potentially President Noboa's next administration as a potential partner as well, who's going to who very much wants to align with the U.S. on this. But in that framework, I think looking at where you all can, as Todd said, make a deal on where and these allies on where the United States can help you with technological partnerships and helping to bring more jobs to an ally who, as we want to diversify our global supply chain on in the tech world, and looking at how that can be also leveraged for your own security interest, I think is a really compelling potential sell with this administration.
If I can jump in here, Anna, I think that that's absolutely right. And I think that, and I haven't spoken with my colleagues or with the administration about this, but sort of the way to think about this is, right now, the U.S. suffered a very brutal hack of all of the telecommunication carriers in the U.S. And they came in through law enforcement. So they were able to infiltrate and get access to all of the communications of every citizen in the U.S. if they wanted it. And I'm sure they focused in on certain politicians. Maybe Congressman Denham's communications were heard, but it's a real area of sensitivity. So the U.S. has been focusing on supply chains, making sure that the supply chains are clean and free of Chinese equipment like Huawei and everything within the U.S. But that only goes so far, because we know that we live in a global society, America first or not. We're all traveling, we're going around places. And so if you don't have clean supply networks and clean networks in other parts of the world, the minute you go to the other countries, you're roaming again, you're using networks that have Chinese equipment in it, for example. And so one way to think about this is we might be able to work as this group of countries to get investment from the US to sort of counter the belts and suspenders, the giving of communications and technology from China at sub-market prices to Central America, South America, Africa. We might be able to counter that by saying, look, we'll work with you to get our supply chains clean, to get safe places for the US, for communications, for military, for manufacturing. So that's just one of many ideas that you could look at the objectives and sensitivities in the US and help that in a way that has something coming back to your region as opposed to solely giving. And I'll stop there.
Another point, just to add to where I think there could be a potential benefit to Costa Rica, is in where President Trump is interested in bringing high skill leaders and changing our immigration system, which I think, many have tried, and I think the U.S. has kicked the can down the road for about 40 years now on reforming our immigration system. But President Trump, and especially the tech leaders, have an extra incentive and desire in a way that other leaders have not in the past on bringing high skill immigrants and making our visa system a little more responsive to technological needs. And I think that could be a potential. Again, I think that is one of the hardest potential things to get past and to get momentum on for him when he's focused on a lot of other things at the same time. But I think that is somewhere that could be a potential opportunity as well.
Could we talk about security? What's the take? I think we've approached this from a trade angle, we've approached this from the immigration angle, but what's the take from a security angle? And one question also for the team. As far as I understand, there has been no appointment of the person in charge in the White House for the National Security Council for Western Hemisphere. So do we have any idea if that's coming up, and what's the angle on security? Anyone?
So I think in the same way that a lot of other realms of appointments are working, President Trump has appointed the Western Hemisphere Special Envoy. So that, as so many things are continuing to get filled in, as we saw this week, we just got a Secretary of Commerce confirmed on Tuesday ahead of the first cabinet meeting. So that, I think, is something to keep in mind, that while this administration is moving at a faster pace than almost any administration has, and really tried to have so many security leaders in place ahead of and their clearances completed, that process is still there, and a lot of people are in acting positions. But again, I would point to the first visit of Rubio being to this region as the signal of where the importance is for it. I think that we do have, and typically at the NSC, we have more long-term career staff who are serving in those positions. But for things like, I think I haven't, we're going to get to those positions at the State Department and at the Department of Defense, or they are going to get to those positions. But I think, again, it's moving faster than it has, but that's also somewhere that I think is not fully formed. I would look to what Claver Caron, the special envoy, is doing. There's a long form Politico piece that's helpful in him. I actually can put it in the chat if people are interested in that, for kind of a directional signal that President Trump has put forward.
Your answer was very clear. Claver Caron is quarterbacking the whole thing for the time being. And that's our impression from down here. So thank you for that clear answer. Anybody else? Otherwise, I would like to open the session for Q&A. Todd, Congressman? No?
Yeah, I mean, I would add, I can see your slide up here now on structural reform is overdue. I would agree. There is a lot that the president can do outside of Congress, and he's moving in that direction very, very quickly. Obviously, immigration was first. We're going to continue to see that evolve, not only on working with ICE and shutting down the uh, big leaks in the border, but also moving into other areas of immigration. He announced this morning a gold card, or actually yesterday afternoon, a gold card. I mean, to me, it's sending a message that he is open to many other areas, including high-tech visas, but looking at our overall immigration system. So he's looking at they're definitely working on the issues that they have on the books already so they can do it without Congress in implementing a lot of laws that have been on the books for quite some time but never enforced or never utilized. So he's looking at those areas first. Immigration, obviously, a huge issue that will continue to evolve, but energy is right behind that. I mean, you're seeing a president that is going to move in multiple directions at the same time on all the issues he can outside of Congress. Trade, another one. Trump 1.0 had a number of trade deals, including USMCA. I would look at a number of single trade deals with specific countries, which is why I think that having a collaboration between the four countries that we're talking about today, I think not only helps to get to the front of the line on those trade deals, but also aligning like interests. But trade will be something that he does early, often, and throughout his presidency. But I would look at all those different issues that he's going to have to do outside of Congress. Congress is only going to be able to operate on a couple of issues, and the biggest one's going to be tax reform. Once they finish reconciliation and some of these budgetary items, that opens the door for tax reform. It will be his single biggest issue that Congress has to tackle. Very similar to addressing Obamacare or overall healthcare system that occupied a lot of his time in Trump 1.0.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Todd, go ahead, Todd. Yeah, go ahead, Todd.
Well, I was just going to add on, I've been looking at some of the comments and questions in the box, and somebody was noting, is the only option to become sort of a yes country, like the country version of a yes man? Is that the only option for Trump? And I really want to put this to Congressman Denham and Ann about this, because from my perspective, and again, I'm not partisan, my primary focus is not politics, but from my perspective, I actually don't think that Trump respects yes people that much. I mean, he uses them, but he doesn't respect them that much. And if you look at who he really seems to respect, it's actually people who say no. But what really is important is how you say no. So, he seems to respect Putin. He seems to respect Xi. He seems to respect North Korea. But he also respects Macron. And Macron, real time, disagreed with Trump in public. And he seems to have this way of being able to deal with the administration without necessarily saying yes to everything. And so I think that the trick when working with the administration is understanding how to have a conversation and how to assert your interest in a way that's at least mutually beneficial and doesn't embarrass, isn't viewed as seeking to embarrass the administration. And so, that's why I think that even more so than ever, it's always been true that you should approach Washington with sophistication and, in groups is a little bit easier. But I think even more so now today. And so I think that giving up things too easily is probably not the answer, but finding ways that are mutually beneficial and finding the best means to articulate that to the administration is the key to success. And
Absolutely.
then Congressman and
Yeah, I agree. And I think, one thing I was going to mention on energy is that you will have an ambassador who's the family of one of the largest energy companies in Texas and the world. And so on that front, I think you could have a more engaged ambassador looking for who could be a voice for Costa Rica on those things, who will want to be. So Mindy Hildebrand, as she comes in, I think could be someone who could, as a friend of the Trump administration, as someone who would want to, help position Costa Rican businesses, is someone I would encourage people getting to know, and of course who we'd be happy to help make connections to. But I think as Todd said, it is a mutually beneficial deal that you need to bring to the table. And that's what we're helping clients do day in, day out, is figure out what their best positioning is and how they can help move forward President Trump's priorities in a way that helps their own. So that's exactly how I'm helping people try to frame it as well, Todd.
Let me agree with you both. And Vanessa, could you please go back to the previous slide?
Okay.
To the previous slide. Okay. So I wrote, topic nearshoring is not about what the US is asking for. It is about what we're asking for. So it's super clear. I'm sorry. It is essential that we have a super clear ask for Trump and for the United States, because Trump does have a very clear ask. So when he asks, we need to ask back, not necessarily with a no, but we need to go back with, this is what we need. This behooves you, and let's work together. And when it comes to negotiation, I think it's super important to keep a close eye on what's happening in the world. Vanessa, can we go to the last slide, please? And there are 3 countries, as Anne was saying, that are to be watched. Number 1, Mexico. There is a deadline coming up next week. And I think Mexico is not just going to say a flat no. And it's a very interesting negotiation. The president of Mexico is very articulate, very sophisticated, and they have a very professional diplomacy history. Of course, China, Anne mentioned that. And last but not least, there was a very recent election on Sunday in Germany. And also, the prime minister there is going to be very shrewd, and he's also he's a businessman. So we will have diplomacy at its best, as Todd and Anne were saying. It's not just saying no, it's not just saying yes, it's saying how, it's saying what it's in for you, what's in for me, let's work together. So thank you, Todd, for bringing up that topic. I think you hit the nail on the head, and this is exactly what Dentons is here to do, help the business sector just not say no, but say how and find solutions. Let's open the floor for questions. What time is it?
So, no, we're in time, Don Pedro, and we
Okay.
appreciate all the feedback that we're getting through the web chat as well as the question and answer. So, we already received some, and I know that the panelists already commented on some of those points, but I am going to start probably just with some of the key questions, like, for example, what is expected will be the cause of the Trump effect to impact the investment flows to Costa Rica, considering the strong alliance with the U.S. and also America's focus on domestic investment. The question is, in your view, how long will it take for the uncertainty to stabilize for a tangible investment to start materializing in Costa Rica? If you get the sense of the question.
I mean, I think that it's an immediate opportunity. First of all, as I said before, this administration is going to be moving in multiple directions all at the same time. Trade is one of those biggest things. And I think one of the biggest takeaways of this conversation here, one should be working together, collaborating, getting in early, continuing to lobby the U.S. government, and secondly, to what Pedro had just recently said, the negotiation. Trump loves to negotiate. He obviously has his plan when he goes in, and I think anybody that's going to go in to negotiate with him ought to have their plan on what their specific needs are, and be prepared to negotiate. I think there can be a win-win solution, but you've got to be prepared to negotiate, and know what he's going to be, any clear negotiation, what you want and what he wants, and try to find some resolution in the middle. I think that not only goes between the four countries we're specifically talking about today, but also specific businesses. I mean, we're walking into the administration often with businesses to resolve sometimes decade-old problems. This is an administration that is not going to stop. It is going to be focused on disruption and change. And that also provides great opportunities to come in and negotiate and get the types of changes that you need both for your business as well as for your country.
Thank you very much, Congressman. I just wanted to also compliment that we have several points on our webinar chat related to our exchange rate. Costa Rica suffers some appreciation of our exchange rate. So there's a question related, I think we could summarize around what is the perception from Washington on the state of our currency at this point?
Let me give some background to my colleagues in Washington, D.C. Costa Rica has been so successful bringing in foreign currency that the colon, the Costa Rican currency, has appreciated substantially, 25%, say, in the last 2 or 3 years. And that's because of tourism, that's because of FDI, that's because of money laundering, yes. So in a way, it's an irony. We are being the victim of our own success. So that is the background. The question to you is: have you heard in Washington D.C. that the colon has been appreciated, and that and how that affects foreign investment in Costa Rica? If you have heard it, if not, we'll just pass on the question.
I don't think that's something that is on a significant radar right now. But it is not my foreign exchange is not my area of expertise right now too. I think Costa Rica can look to improve trade to be a potential help, but I think in terms of exchange, that's something that we can look into and get back to you on.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Let me just give you the audience one take. It's interest rates. If Trump is successful, interest rates will go down. U.S. interest rates and international interest rates will go down, and that will suck some of the dollars coming into Costa Rica, because what had happened is that interest rates in Costa Rica were also high. So money was leaving the United States and leaving other parts of the world. Dollars were leaving the United States and other parts of the world and were coming back. But if interest rates go down in the U.S. and in the world, there might be a closer equilibrium. But we'll have to have another seminar just on this one.
Yeah, and one of the ironies, Pedro, is that the administration's stated position is that they want a weaker dollar. They prefer a weaker dollar. But if you look at some of the policies that they're putting in place, you would naturally think that that would create a stronger dollar. So I think it's too early to know how that's all going to play out. I mean, I'm certainly not a currency expert, so I don't want to pretend that I am. But I know that there's a lot of uncertainty because there seems to be a disconnect between the stated goal and the likely impact on currency exchanges that some of the tariffs and some of the other things are likely to have.
Thank you. Vanessa?
Okay, so I think this very important topic related to the future that we could expect related to our foreign direct investment. Definitely, we are very expectant at what is happening in what we call our advanced manufacturing sector, where obviously semiconductors plays a role, and we have a good position right now. But there are a couple questions related to the medical manufacturing sector that it's our main export product at this point. It's a very dynamic industry for Costa Rica, has driven the growth in the last years. Have you heard anything as well? We know that there are some changes even in the regulatory framework of the FDA and all of that. So if you could refer to the medical device as well.
Yeah, well, I think on that front, we saw I think one positive thing we saw this week was that some of the employees at the FDA who were on medical device approvals were brought back, who were initially let go. So I think that in terms of helping continue the speed of the FDA's approvals of medical devices is strong. And I do think that that's a great area for cooperation and continued development of deals with the U.S. and looking at how, especially as I think one thing we haven't really talked about is how much the administration wants to essentially clean up NAFTA and looking at issues where Mexico is now under fire for one, I think just the governments are not in alignment of in terms of leadership and ideology guiding both of them. But on the front of Chinese manufacturing moving to Mexico and now being targeted for trying to get in on NAFTA deals, I think you all have a great opportunity to position yourselves in the medical device community and with your partner, with a potential partnership in Puerto Rico that I think Todd can speak to more, looking at how those kinds of alliances and that kind of just you all being such a strong, safe partner to have that kind of critical device making done in, I think is a great piece to advocate for and to lean into with this administration as an opportunity.
Great. And by the way, for it to be a little bit more into, oh, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
I would just
Sorry.
add on to that. I agree completely with Ann. I think it's a tremendous opportunity of growth. I've spent time with Robert Kennedy, RFK, and he's very close to the president, and he's going to be moving in a separate direction, very similar to Elon Musk. They've got opportunities to move, to grow in their sector. And I see medical devices as one of those things where they've got opportunities, they want to see growth, and certainly don't want to, again, rely on China for a lot of the new technologies out there, want to go with a real ally and business partner on it. So I think it's tremendous opportunities to shake things up and to grow right now. And I would just add, another good friend is Jennifer Gonzalez Colon, the new governor, has great ties with those of us that served with her, but also within the administration too. And I think I would use Puerto Rico as one of those partners where it's a good negotiating partner.
Yeah, I mean, to follow up on your point, Congressman, I think that Puerto Rico provides this group with an advantage because it sort of has a leg in both worlds, right? I mean, it's a
Like
way. Yeah, exactly. It's a way that the group can still be America first in a sense. And another thing that strikes me, and again, this is going to require some consideration. So I always like to think out loud with friends. And so something I've noticed is Trump seems to look at trade imbalances in a very unique way. I mean, I'm not convinced it's a good way, but he just looks at volume and he says, are we buying more than you're buying from us? And if they're not balanced, there's an issue. And that doesn't take into account population size or anything else. But it strikes me that for some of the countries that we're talking about today, they're not huge manufacturers. They're service providers, some manufacturing. But the point is, you don't have that big trade imbalance that, say, a country like Mexico does, which I think might give you more room to work with when it comes to doing more manufacturing, doing more services, getting more of a team set up with the U.S. And again, I'm very, very interested to hear what the congressman and Pedro and Ann, what you think about that, because it seems to me that when you look at it from an optics level, this group has certain advantages that many other regions just don't have.
I'm going
Could
to
be that it was a bad idea.
No, I'm going to tell you the reason for my pausing, because I also wanted to be very realistic. And Vanessa, if we can go back to my slide previous to last.
Okay, one sec.
For the Costa Rican audience, Costa Rica needs to lift its own weight, and there's a structural reform that it's long overdue in Costa Rica. There's a structural reform that is long overdue in Panama. And I'm going to find out about those two countries at this moment. And the United States is undergoing its own structural reform. If we don't do our job, if we don't do our homework here, we're going to suffer. So energy prices are relatively high in Costa Rica and in Panama. Our infrastructure is poor, and we have very protectionistic labor legislation. So if we really want to compete, if we really want to make ourselves available to the Trump administration and say, hey, here we are, we're the next Taiwan, we better be sure that we have crossed our T's and dotted our I's, and we haven't. So that is why I paused, Todd, because I don't want to live with a sense of false optimism if we don't do our homework. And this is why I put this up. It's super important, because it doesn't matter if we are able to negotiate, because we have very good negotiators and we find how to say how, et cetera, et cetera. But if energy is expensive, if labor is not competitive, if our infrastructure is poor, then it doesn't matter. So this is the reason for my pausing, and I thank you for your comment, because this reminded me that I needed to say this.
So, Don Pedro, I think to complement back to, Congressman Dorham and your comment, there is also a post on the page that refers to talent development, and it calls back because the service sector in Costa Rica has played additionally to manufacturing and to goods a great deal of dynamism for the economy, and it's probably one of the main drivers of jobs in countries. So we pose there a big opportunity, when we think about the tariffs and all the challenges in terms of exports and the balance payment balance and so on. Services pretty much is in another play field. So towards Don Ariel's question, maybe thinking about where definitely we could add value, not to the entire strategy. Services definitely brings about a potential for Costa Rica and an opportunity in terms of those negotiations with the U.S. So I would like to hear as well, and to come to the point of Don Ariel's, what are you seeing in terms of talent development and how Costa Rica could play a role there as well?
I'm sorry, can you restate the question one more time?
Basically, I think the point to Don Ariel's question is there any plans towards that strategic partnership and negotiation, with countries like Costa Rica, particularly in the case of services? We hear about the CHIPS Acts and all the funds that are out there available for talent development, but expanding a little bit broader with how fast technology is transitioning, I think it's question, and Don Ariel, please just jump in if you want. What about, a broader strategy in terms of talent development across the region?
I thought I saw Todd trying to go off mute there, but I think that was no, I think that it could be a great potential aim of a partnership is channeling, of course. We see in the US much of our global development funding on pause and being re-examined. So in terms of the usual areas of aid that would be part of that, in terms of workforce development, in terms of helping develop in industrial capacity, things like that are likely on hold, and we'll see where that it's still to be determined where that will land. But a aim of a partnership could very well be looking at how can you potentially look at how you could leverage what your needs are on workforce development and other areas of technological investment to leverage that need and put that on the table as part of making a deal for security guarantees and helping the administration on fronts of border issues and regional security in alliance in ways that that could be attractive to the White House.
Ann and Congressman, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. There could be a real opportunity for Costa Rica and some of these other countries, in that, my perception is that sometimes this administration will rip up deals that were done by past administrations, not necessarily because they have any difference, any core disagreement with what was done, but they would rather do the deals themselves. So you could have a deal in place, rip it out, and then come back with a different deal, and then take credit that you've done it better, that you've done it different, that it's more America first. And I'm not trying to be petty, but if you, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, because if that's true, that becomes an opportunity for Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, Panama, Puerto Rico to come in and say, we think we can do a better deal and restructure what we're doing, and you can get credit for it. Here's, do this for us, and then we can help with this. We can help bolster your ties in America and keep China out. I do think that's going to be incredibly important. I think anything that these countries can do to say, we're not letting China get in, we're not letting them do investments, I think it's really important. I think, Venezuela is very complicated, at least from my perspective, because on the one hand, the administration would want to resolve some of the immigration issues. On the other hand, I think that if it were left to Trump alone, he doesn't have a problem sometimes with strongmen. So could he deal with Maduro? It wouldn't surprise me a bit. But there's some really anti-Venezuela people in the administration. I think that that's really complicated. But I'd really like to hear Ann and Congressman Denham, your thoughts on that, because you're much more of an expert on these issues than I am.
Well, I think it's a good point. I mean, certainly President Trump is not afraid of working with countries or even dictators or politicians that might not see eye to eye with him. So he can definitely put deals together. But I agree with Todd, with your other point. He's not afraid to rip things up either and start over, even if there's not much of a change. I think one of the big things that Costa Rica has going for it is not only a strong ally, but at a time when Costa Rica is willing to challenge the status quo and be a disruptor as well, change from the inside as we're changing from the inside. It gives an opportunity to grow together, and I think you've got to utilize that opportunity that we have right now today. It really separates Costa Rica apart from many other regions around the world. And allows for a stronger partnership as we grow together.
And I think I agree with everything Congressman Denham just said, but I think adding to kind of the heft of what this administration wants to do on Venezuela and issues there and in Cuba as well, I think looking at Secretary Rubio's placement at Secretary is something that's going to really drive, and we have many years of his record on what he's done in that space, and many years of statements of what his ambitions are for hoping to get a different kind of regime in Venezuela. So I think on that front, and we can expect challenge, and we can expect, but we also, I think on Costa Rica's front, can look at where can it and other allies in the region potentially partner on those aims. Then I saw another question in the chat that I'll quickly address on tax issues. So I would say that the tax bill is President Trump's main priority, along with the budget cutting. And so while we're also looking at significant pressure to renew the 2017 Trump tax cuts, we also are looking at a real need to keep some forms of revenue. So we have a very strong tax group. If if anybody needs specific counsel on that issue, and also have Congressman Crowley, who was on the Ways and Means Committee as a colleague. But I think on the repatriation taxes and some of the kind of more outlying issues, I know Representative LaHood also had a bill on the table that was looking at ending taxes abroad for ending taxes on income for Americans who are living abroad, that we're thinking is not going to make much progress this year either. So I think we're in an interesting space and looking at how to maintain as much revenue as possible, while President Trump also wants to cover the tax cuts extension. But we're also anticipating significant downturn in revenue from the tax cuts.
Thank you, Anne. Now we already opened the microphone, so I think Don Ariel is the first one. I also have Johnny Mata, Adrian Cáceres, and Adrian Brand. So Don Ariel, if you want to go first. You're mute, I think, Don Ariel. Don Ariel, you're mute.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, now. Thank you.
Oh, perfect. First of all, thank you so much for the space, Todd, Jeff, and Pedro, and Vanessa, and everybody in CINDE. I think that it's important. The question that Vanessa was asking is that Costa Rica has, in the last few years, been demonstrated the capacity to move not only from services to R&D. We have many companies here that are really leading some of the technologies that right now the world is transforming, including artificial intelligence and other aspects of development, right? What is the possibility in regards to a stronger partnership to speed up the pace of development and find ways on how to be able to actually just position Costa Rica far beyond to where we are today as a hub of technology and, of course, development for the interest that we have in the world for this type of areas?
I'll jump in, and again, I'd like to have my colleagues follow up on that. I think that one intriguing possibility for this would be to go in with, and Costa Rica already is masterful at this, is to go in with the American companies. So rather than necessarily leading the charge directly with the administration, perhaps coming up with a strategy where you're working with the U.S. companies to say that this R&D that you can assist from your countries is actually helping the U.S. companies and helping U.S. dominance in AI and keeping some of the other countries out. So in other words, if the A&I in Costa Rica, in particular, doesn't help the U.S., it's going to help someone else. So figuring out a way to work with the company so that the companies are your voices in partnership with you to this administration for achieving some of the rules, the regulations, the funding, if you need to support those efforts. Because I can't think of anybody better than Oracle coming in and speaking with Trump about how he wants some assistance in making Costa Rica a bolster for what the U.S. is doing and keeping it out of the hands of the other countries. That's one thing. And again, this is going to require a lot more thought and careful consideration. But it seems to me that style of thinking, of finding that way where it's a mutual benefit and you're going in with allies, is going to be much better than trying to go in solely as Costa Rica saying, we can help you.
You're right. I totally agree, Todd. This negotiation is so important that we should not leave it just to the government. The government, I was in government, Anne was in government, Congressman was obviously in government. Government has very limited knowledge of business and what's actually happening on the ground. So thank you, Ariel. I mean, what you just said is super important. We're not just putting together chips, we are doing R&D. That's super important for context, and that story needs to be told firsthand in Washington, D.C. And this is just one example of what we're saying. And the fact, or the possibility rather, that the private sector of multiple countries have a voice in Washington, D.C. allows for the right message to be delivered in Washington, D.C. Otherwise, the wrong message may very well be delivered in Washington, D.C. So that's a very good point.
Yeah, it is a good point. Not only the allies of business that are important to Costa Rica, but the friendships that those allies have. So the friendships of CEOs that have relationships with the president, and letting him know the story of, yes, they might be American companies, but they're American companies that have huge interests in Costa Rica, and they partner with those governments as well. It is a critical point, and those relationships are very, very important in the Trump administration. Very relationship driven.
Great. Thank you very much. Johnny? Is Johnny available, or I know for sure we also had Adrian Casares.
You might just be on mute.
Yeah, need to unmute just in case everyone is muted. Okay. I think they are not available. So I'm just going to pick up on some of the questions that we still have on the chat as well. We had a question related to, I'm sorry, one sec. Well, they are very much related to the talent. We also have good day. Do you foresee potential tax reform? I know that, and you mentioned the general tax strategy that is being followed. I know for sure some of the key questions related tax is going towards global minimum tax, which is something that has kept a lot of the companies, aware of how sensitive this is. Do you have anything, particular and specific to global minimum tax?
I think the president, and I think the congressman can speak to this potentially better, but I'm pretty confident the president has said that he is very strongly against the OECD recommendation of a global minimum tax and would not see the US entering that in this administration.
Okay. There's one very interesting one. For example, it is, how would a Trump administration view Chinese investment in Costa Rica? Would the US take steps to counter it?
Yes. So I think it depends on what the sector is. So, but in tech or in defense, I think that would be seen as a strong step against U.S. partnership and investment. So I think we're in that level of competition with China that, and the U.S. is trying so strongly to outcompete China on those fronts that those fronts would be. I believe that in defense, in some types of industrial development, and in tech, it would be seen as a potentially potential detraction from the relationship if it's something at a large scale, and especially if it was incentivized by the Costa Rican government. I think that would be something that could be detrimental to the relationship.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll do two last questions. Oh, go ahead, Todd. Sorry.
I was going to say, I think it's a really good point, and I think that it can't be underestimated. Let's take Ukraine. I'm sure that you've seen in the news this deal about the minerals in Ukraine, and it's being posed on the surface as about getting the money back from the U.S. that the U.S. has put into Ukraine. And yeah, maybe that's part of it, but I get the nagging feeling that it's much more about getting out from under. Same thing with Greenland. I think it's about getting access to materials that are critically important for the future of technology that aren't controlled solely by China, because over decades, China's done a really good job of getting control over the basic building blocks of the technology that we all use every single day. And so I think that when you look at how focused, at least from my perspective, this administration seems to be on getting out from China control in various different parts of the world, I think it's a very important message. I think that, if, for example, in Panama, if the president doesn't renew the contracts with the ports, takes other steps that are viewed as pro-US, anti-China, I think that that's an important part of the message. You taking these steps to invest in Costa Rica, to invest in us, helps prevent China from getting more of a foothold in Central and South America in your backyard. Again, this would have to be worked over, and I'd rely on my colleagues here, but that does seem to me to be a very important part of the message. And by contrast, if you went into a big deal with China that, had major investment and big splashy thing, I think it could be very detrimental, because I think that is something that could really backfire.
I agree, and I think that Costa Rica is starting from a good point. I mean, the pushing back on Huawei, I think, is a excellent example of something that the U.S. will look at. The United States is going to look at what are those strategic industries where Costa Rica is partnering with the U.S. and more importantly, with U.S. companies instead of Chinese companies. And a lot of very important sectors that you mentioned. One of the questions I saw in the chat is about in what U.S. investments are going to be. I think that the relevance of that is, a lot of the talk globally is how many cuts the U.S. is making in many different areas. And we're seeing, those cuts not only with DOGE and some of the efficiencies, but also in the appropriations process and what the United States is going to focus on and spend money on. And a lot of those cuts, many are talking about the Department of Defense cuts, where I actually think we're going to see an increase of funding, an increase in funding of technology, and specifically an increase in Space Force and space technology. And I think that there's great opportunities to partner in those areas. So, a lot of talk about cuts, but there is going to be increase in spending in many different areas, specifically in tech and space.
Thank you very much. And one last question. Don Francisco is asking, with the significant layoff happening in the U.S., with the continued which will continue to happen both in the public and private sector, there will be a huge labor force available, which will lower overall cost of labor, which in turn will lower cost of supply chain in the U.S. That may have a direct impact on traditional costs, favorable locations near and offshore. Can you comment on that, please?
Well, let me, there's one premise there that I don't agree with.
I was going to say the same.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead. I was just agreeing that with the premise might be.
Yes. I think that in the private sector, there will be in the United States. I think unemployment is going to go down. I think there are many ways the United States is attracting investment, and that's going to create more jobs. That doesn't mean that that's going to create less jobs for us. We need to be very shrewd as to where the opportunities are, and we need to position ourselves, because the United States cannot do it all. And so we need to be very strategic as to what the United States should not do, and then position ourselves. Again, we need to be very clear as to what our message and our ask is going to be. Trump is not going to prepare our ask, or it's not going to give us anything we don't ask for. So that's also part of what we need to do, and that is also part of what we need to do as a team, in our opinion. Multiple countries which have synergies, and that can present a united front.
And I expect that there's going to be continued growth in the U.S. economy. There's going to be new opportunities for new jobs. The cuts that we're talking about right now are mostly on the efficiency side. I mean, one of the biggest efficiencies that is going across the board in the entire administration is forcing people to come back to work. And you're seeing downsizing just by people that don't want to come back to work or don't want to work a 5 day a week job in the office, which is what the government job is. So forcing people to come back to work is going to not only downsize the federal government, but it's more about creating efficiency than it is about cutting the overall size. There will be some cuts as well, but it's more about creating the efficiencies.
Yeah, and I was at a lunch yesterday with NASDAQ CFO and a bunch of other private equity leaders in Texas who were just on the edge of their seat for how many deals are about to be unleashed, how many more IPOs they're anticipating coming this year at a much bigger scale than we've had in the last year. I think we had 180 IPOs in the US last year, and they think that that could almost double this year in volume and potentially size. So that I think pipeline is why we're pretty optimistic on where US investors see opportunities to grow here, and where we think that while there are some layoffs in tech and government, that those will be have other places that they can land in fairly short order. And is our hope.
Okay.
It's the logical thing to do. It's before we go, and I'm sure Vanessa is about to wrap up. I want to thank CINDE profusely. I've been checking the attendance numbers. We've hit over 120 people, so this is tremendous. So it's a great opportunity to have these conversations, because I know there is a great deal of anxiety all over the world, and I think the more we talk about this in a logical and cohesive way, the better. So before it's too late, our thanks to CINDE profusely.
Don Pedro, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone on the panelists. Actually, as we bring this insightful panel discussion to a close, definitely we really want to thank you for your time, for the dedication, or previous conversations as well to online. I think, this just reflects on the strategic partnership that we have developed over time. So, and yes, as you say, this was a topic that everyone was very expectant of over. So we appreciate all the, deep and rich, insights that you share with us. To our audience, we really thank you for your time and your engagement, and, staying with us for over an hour, for your questions and, for your participation. We want to continue promoting these exchange forums and strengthening a lot, our business ecosystem. We know that we're going through very interesting and uncertain times. So, information really builds up for those conversations. As we move forward, let's hope we could continue these conversations. In some few days, we're going to send out another invitation. We're going to take now the approach of understanding Costa Rica macroeconomic perspectives for 2024, 2025, so we could start linking and, building up all those insights that, as you run your operations here in our country, we start preparing and improving. And by the way, we definitely going to take on all the recommendations, suggestions that you share with us. So with no further ado, we want to give you back some few minutes, but thank you, everyone from Dentons. It was a luxury to have you with us today. And thank you, everyone, for participating.